Hello, hello, and welcome back for day 8 of 10 days to 10 years sober. There are officially 3 days left until I turn 10. So we are officially in the home stretch. I'm so excited to be here sharing this special mini-series with you, and I was reflecting over the weekend about how the Healing Happens podcast would definitely not be here had it not been for this single decision that I made nearly 10 years ago to get sober. Truly everything good in my life has followed from this one decision. And of course, so much of what I share on the Healing Happens podcast has come from my experience with different somatic healing modalities and all of the training and education and experience that I have had with these modalities. But the more that I record these podcasts and the more that I share, the more that I realize that truly so much of the foundation of what I share with my clients and who I have become as a woman comes from the lessons I learned and the mentorship that I received early on in recovery. So it just feels really special and just very full circle to be here sharing this particular series with you on this podcast. So today we are going to discuss a topic that might be a little touchy. I've been pretty open about the fact that I adore the 12 steps. I am forever grateful for the incredible foundation, not only for my sobriety and addiction recovery, but for my life that the 12 steps have given me. We call it a design for living, and it truly is. However, I am pretty vocal about the fact that I do disagree with certain things in the 12-step programs, and I do think that the 12 steps fall short of truly what it takes for total healing from alcoholism and addiction. And so today I am going to share a little bit about that and just kind of my experience with it. And in particular, today I want to talk about over-identification and just in general identification with labels, diagnoses, and things that truly aren't you. So let's get into it. So when it comes to over-identification, I've examined this through a few different lenses, and I will likely talk about this more on future episodes if I ever do one on my journey with just mental health in general. In our Western society, we push diagnoses so much, and a lot of that has to do with the medical industrial complex and getting insurance to pay for things and the pharmaceutical industry and all of that. But this over-identification is also just a tendency of the analytical mind and of the masculine. It's this drive for answers and an explanation and something to anchor yourself to, because we live in a society that does not promote authenticity. It does not promote the inner work and the soul searching required to really know yourself and to live in your authenticity. And so people often just end up becoming kind of this collection of labels, which is really not something that I'm into. So when it comes to this topic of over-identification, I do think that often people in recovery can be overly identified with this label of being an alcoholic or addict. And I know that I was for a really long time. I mean, the fact that at 12-step meetings, we stand up and every time we say our names, we say alcoholic or addict after our name for 40 years into recovery, forever. I don't necessarily agree with that. Alcoholic is not my identity. That is a pattern of behavior that plays out within me 100%. And the intention of it, which is a pure intention, is to serve as a reminder that drugs and alcohol truly are the solution for an alcoholic. A lot of the time, when you take away the drugs and alcohol, our lives get worse. I know that was my experience. On the outside, it might seem like things get better because maybe you're not, getting DUIs or, going to jail or overdosing or things like this. But often our internal experience, our loud, fault-finding, critical, overactive minds, that voice gets louder. And I touched on a previous episode about the pain inside of us, most often caused by early childhood trauma, that we are trying to numb through drinking. All of a sudden, that pain is there, and we can feel it. And so sometimes, the first step talks about the unmanageability of our lives. And a lot of people come into recovery thinking that it was the drugs and alcohol that made our lives unmanageable. But actually, our lives can be unmanageable because of the pattern of behavior that is alcoholism or addiction running wild in our lives, whether it manifests through drinking or some other destructive behavior. But where I differ from a lot of traditional recovery teachings is that I do believe that ultimately you can heal that and you can shed that pattern of behavior. So I was blessed early on in recovery to be in a home group that focused heavily on the solution and what recovery looks like in the day that you're in. So there was very little focus on sharing your drunk-a-log and all your arrests and all the crazy stuff that happened to you when you were drinking. And the focus instead was on, okay, well, what does alcoholism, ego and self, look like in the moment that you're in today? 1 month, 1 year, 10 years, 30 years away from a drink. And to me, that was way more helpful. Yes, it is important at the very beginning to hear the stories and to identify and to not feel alone. But for me, I didn't need to hear all those war stories for very long. I wanted to hear about how do we survive sober and how do we thrive sober. But even that, this idea of waking up every single morning with your alcoholism waking up before you and telling you suck and telling you the world is horrible and all this kind of stuff, I don't believe that you're doomed to that reality forever. And that has been the gift of somatic trauma healing in my life. The more healing of my trauma that I have done, the closer and closer I've gotten to my authentic self, and the less and less I run the pattern of alcoholism. Because at the end of the day, what diagnoses really are is a pattern of behavior. Psychological diagnoses are originally diagnosed essentially by a doctor asking you a series of questions like, do you do this? Do you think like this? Do you behave in this way? Do you react like this? Have you ever done this and that? And if you answer yes to enough of those questions, you fit the pattern of behavior that is now this diagnosis. But I don't believe that you were born with that diagnosis. I don't believe you were born broken, and so I believe that you can heal. And so this constant reinforcement of I'm an alcoholic, I'm an alcoholic, I'm an alcoholic, I understand the purpose it is serving. We never want to forget where we came from. But if we believe that we can heal and transcend that pattern of behavior, over-identifying with anything that is not our true essence will never serve to take us into our highest iteration, the person we were really meant to be in this life. And so there's the over-identification in that sense. and how it can possibly prevent us from truly healing. And just keeps us kind of on this hamster wheel of, feeling insane, applying the solution, feeling insane, applying the solution, instead of just getting off the ride. And then another form of this kind of over-identification that I've experienced is in the form of spiritual pride. And this is something that I've really had to examine as I make my way into, the wellness world and the yoga space and breath work and all this kind of stuff. I've definitely, over the years, caught myself having moments of arrogance when it comes to things like plant medicine or, mind-altering substances that people use for healing. I've definitely had this attitude of like, oh, well, I can get there on my own. Like, I don't need those substances. Like, I'm sober and healing, and that is better than what you're doing. And it's a little like, ugh, to admit that, I've come a long way with my thoughts about plant medicine. I definitely believe that it's something that calls to you, and I personally have not felt that call. I personally do not feel like so far on my journey there is anything that has come up for healing that I have not been able to work through with breathwork, somatic experiencing, all of the modalities that I work with, Reiki, all this kind of stuff. But, if that happened for me one day, I would keep my mind open to the possibility of exploring that. But this arrogance, this pride, this over-identification with like sober healing is better than healing that involves plant medicine or substances, or like, I don't even want to use CBD to go to bed because I don't want any substances at all because I'm pure and sober and this, that, and the other thing. And ultimately, it depends on where those attitudes are coming from. I very much believe that there is a freedom in not needing anything outside of yourself to help you sleep, or, if you're taking CBD for anxiety, like I personally would rather explore, why do I have the anxiety and how can I heal the underlying cause of that versus reaching for something, even if it's plant-based or natural or organic or all the things. But am I doing that from a place of truth? Or am I doing that from a place of arrogance and over-identification with being sober and over-identification with spiritual superiority, really? Like that's ick. That's not cool. And that's not something I want to participate in. And so I'm constantly checking myself on that, as I move through my life and my recovery. But I think at the end of the day, it is really important for us to continue to check in with ourselves and really ask ourselves, am I identifying with something that is not me? When I was going through my yoga teacher training, my teacher talked about this meditation that she did for a while, especially after she became a mother. And she would simply just sit and ask the question, who am I? And immediately what tends to come up is, mother, yoga teacher, sister, daughter, all these labels that we put on ourselves, alcoholic, addict, mentally ill, this, that, and the other. And she would continue to ask the question, and she would go deeper and deeper and deeper into herself and keep asking and keep asking and keep seeking. And when we get past all of the patterns and the labels and these, identities that we put on ourselves, we're able to get down to the core essence of who we are. And this meditation exercise was incredibly powerful for me on my journey as well. And for me personally, what I got down to is that my core essence is just this effervescent joy. Anyone who knows me well knows that that is 100% who I am at my core, and that is my authentic truth. But I had to keep asking and keep seeking and keep healing and searching and peeling away and unlearning all these layers. You know, we hear so often, this is branching into mental health, but, you know, especially on TikTok, which I just think is like a trauma pit of hell and victimhood, and I can hardly stand to be there, but we hear a lot, you know, my ADHD, my anxiety, like it's something that you own, like it is you, and it's not you. It is an accumulation of a pattern of behaviors that you used at some point in your life to survive the trauma of your environment. The body's built for survival. If I had not numbed myself with drugs and alcohol for 10 years, I probably would not have survived those 10 years. I needed to be asleep and numb to get through it. But I don't need that anymore. And so continuing to reinforce these false identities when we actually have the power to heal the underlying causes of what created the identity, in my opinion, does not serve our highest evolution as humans on this earth. So I will be back tomorrow. We have 2 more days, 2 more topics that I'm super excited to share about. This one may have been a little controversial, may have been a little triggering for some people, but I encourage you to sit with your triggers. My triggers have been my biggest teachers in life, and the more that I am willing to sit with and consider and build the capacity to be with the discomfort that comes when I'm triggered, the more that I'm able to heal, the more authentic I'm able to be, and the more connections I'm able to keep and cultivate in my life, which is really a huge part of the point of being here, in my opinion. So thank you so much for being here with me. I will see you tomorrow. Share this with anyone you think might be interested in a bit of an alternative view on things, and enjoy the rest of your day. Mwah.